In the words of Buffalo Springfield, there's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. You're lucky I didn't break into song there, but certainly the market has got tongues wagging. Both Advtech and Curro Holdings, education businesses, are trading under cautionary. Keith McLachlan, fund manager at Alpha Wealth, joins me in studio to talk more about this cautionary tale. Two education businesses. Curro, brand new, relatively speaking, 10 or 12 years old, owns sort of a broad spread of education businesses under the Curro label. Then you've got Advtech, which has got a broader spread of education businesses, something like 20 brands, from everything from the guys at Crawford College to training institutions in downtown Johannesburg. There's a rumour. Could it be true?
Well, just to give you a little bit of a background to this rumour, and it's entirely speculation.
Two cautionaries do not a deal make, in other words.
Absolutely, but the timing and the positioning is quite interesting. Curro put out a cautionary, I think it was about the 12th of June, could be corrected, and about 2 weeks later, Advtech puts out a cautionary with a bit of detail saying, listen, they've received an unsolicited offer for the entire company. That's the only information we actually have to work on.
Big shareholders in Advtech?
Actually, Advtech is a relatively large free float.
It's not like Curro, which is like big PSG stake.
Curro is really owned and run by PSG. It's an extension thereof. It's one of their satellite investments. Advtech, on the other hand, is almost entirely held by institutions. We actually hold it in the fund. So there's my disclaimer right there. We like the education space, we like Advtech. But its big shareholders, I think, is Sanlam, Coronation. It's all the usual suspects. Just because it's for its size relatively liquid, yet gives you a very pure, nice exposure to inoffensive, quite defensive.
Inoffensive. Well, one of them some people regard as offensive, and the other one as inoffensive. Advtech is regarded as inoffensive. Curro has had its fair share of political issues this year. They're accused of racism at one of their schools at Roodeplaat. Whether or not that allegation is true, it certainly got the attention of the Gauteng Education Department. It has seen Panyaza Lusufi, the local MEC, go to the school and threaten hellfire and brimstone. Not long after that, there was another incident where there was an allegation of racial separation of kids. There's a lot of politics and noise around Curro. Does Advtech really want to get sucked into that?
Well, on two sides, that's the first, and actually just stepping back from the question for a moment, this is the argument for uni-brands versus multi-brands. Uni-brands, you get synergies, you know, you build like an EOH style model, where all the businesses they buy, they ultimately get rebranded EOH, and EOH just grows as a single brand. The problem is if you get that brand, if it gets tainted, everything gets tainted. And Curro's gone that route, where Advtech went the other route. They built and bought their way over many good couple decades into a multi-branded approach, and they haven't rebranded everything Advtech. It's actually, it means in a way these brands are little pockets, and they can operate let's call them mutually exclusively of the other ones. But I think if, and it's entirely speculative, if Curro is bidding for Advtech, the key thing is not so much whether Advtech wants to be part of Curro or not. To understand the institutions own it. It's got a free float. So what do the shareholders want? And the shareholders, at the end of the day, want a return. Is this cash or script? And at what price is this?
No, absolutely. But there's also a big regulatory regime. You'll have a Department of Education which will wade into this if it is unhappy. You will also, of course, have the Competition Authority saying, hold on a second. Actually, we have got a diverse education system in South Africa. There's government-controlled schooling. There is the independent schools, the old schools, the Michael Houses of the world and the bishops of the world. And then we've got these new education groups, these businesses which have formed in the last 20 years or thereabouts. Now, if we allow consolidation of Curro and Advtech, the two biggest gorillas in private education in South Africa, that may have competition issues.
That's a little bit of a misnomer. Do you know that Curro is roughly 1% market share, and Advtech's roughly 3 or 4 if you take into account the latest Centuris and Moravis acquisitions? Collectively, they're about 5%.
Of the total education.
Total education.
Okay. But if we look at it in terms of private education, it's got to be bigger.
So, yeah, I mean, work backwards. There's about 55 million people in South Africa. There's give or take 12, 13 million school going. And then Advtech and Curro don't even break about 1 million.
Okay. So on that basis, Curro with 1% and Advtech with 3% of the school-going population, it's a deal that the competition authorities couldn't oppose.
I think they would let it through. I don't think they'll have any problem with it. And then Department of Education, I'm not particularly close. I don't know what background sort of compliance and like needs to be, but it's more than likely.
The politics of this deal, they're going to make a lot of noise.
But understand
can the investment case stand the noise?
More than likely, but also understand that the licenses attach at a school level, not necessarily at a group level.
Okay.
So it may not be actually that simple. But I don't think if any deal like this were to be put together, I don't think that there'd be any regulatory or compliance issues.
Okay. Wouldn't it be a lot healthier for South Africa's education system? We're going outside of investment here, and I apologise for that. There's been talk that when Leslie Marsdorp arrived, and then no sooner had he sort of unpacked his stuff and worked out where the bathroom was, that he packed it all up and left again, and now is going off to
You've been there the whole time. He was the chairman.
Yes, I know, but it was a new wing that he'd moved into. The most bizarre story ever.
Yeah.
That suggested that actually there was foreign interest in Advtech, and he didn't want to be taken over, and that's why he went.
Well, there are a couple of things to consider here. For a moment, let's forget Curro. Just forget it. Advtech, after the Centuris and Marives acquisitions, is predominantly a private schooling. Their tertiary and staff resourcing sides are very small.
Yeah.
And this schooling segment is, first of all, quite large, very cash generative.
Yeah.
So it's great for a private equity style business that wants to use debt and use free cash flow to pay off this debt. And secondly, thirdly of all, it actually has a fair amount of spare capacity as well, which as schools get profitable, there's that J curve in their profitability and cash generation. So something like a Brait, where Advtech is about 5-10% of Brait's market cap. Brait's got a whole lot of cash on the balance sheet. It very desperately has to deploy, as we can see in the deals it's making. Something like this would fit the bill very, very nicely. So forgetting Curro, this is a private equity.
I mean, a private equity play potentially. I mean, that is really interesting. But also the guy who founded Crawford then went on to found Redham, and Redham has got interesting expansion plans there as well. Suddenly you see him selling perhaps the Redham business into a private equity funded Advtech. Suddenly that becomes a very powerful grouping. What might Curro be up to if it's not up to Advtech? Because the timing of the cautionaries doesn't really fit. There's a 2-week gap. It'd be massively remiss of Advtech to only issue a cautionary 2 weeks after Curro did.
Not necessarily.
If there was an offer on the table.
I would disagree. Play out the scenario, a deal lands on the table. The board of directors, first of all has to get together. Takes a bit of time. All have to work their way through legal documents. Takes a bit of time. Need second opinions from lawyers. Takes a bit of time. You don't want to issue out a cautionary when actually this is just a friendly letter and not actually an intention to buy, etc., and all the ramifications thereof. Okay? So I think a 2-week window is not completely unreasonable. Perhaps a little slow, but not unreasonable.
Okay.
So that said, Curro could well simply just be buying something else. These guys
that'd be such a disappointment after 10 minutes of unpacking it. But I suspect it might be, you know.
Well, collectively, they're less than 5% of the market. This is a very fragmented market. There are pockets of groups of schools that are still run quite nicely, that are at this point probably quite happy to sell.
Well, we've seen Curro go in and mop up some really big brand name independent schools and bring them into the Curro fold, and they've done that very effectively. Advtech has been a lot quieter. I mean, for a long time, Advtech seemed like it was asleep, as it just.
I think arguably it was.
And Frank Thompson left, and then he's back, and now there is a deal in the offing. But there is a lot of consolidation which can happen, and these guys can independently really grow their businesses. As a shareholder in Advtech, are you in Curro as well?
No, not in Curro.
But that implies then you wouldn't want Curro to buy Advtech, because you wouldn't want to be a Curro shareholder if they gave you scrip.
Well, like I said, there's 2 major variables as a shareholder. First thing is it cash or script. If it's script, I don't want Curro script.
No.
Curro script.
Why don't you want Curro script?
I view it as at best fairly valued. One can make a lot of arguments.
So this is not a great deal then for Advtech shareholders?
You're getting script at 190 times price earnings, buying your 25 times price earnings script. Not a great deal. So cash or script, cash might be all right, but then it's a valuation consideration. And our view, so play out.
Does PSG ever pay for anything in cash? I don't think they do, historically.
Maybe on the private equity side.
Yeah, maybe.
But Advtech, like in our opinion, we view it as worth about 15 Rand. So we'll factor in a bit of a control premium of 10-20%. You're potentially looking at a takeout target of 16-17 Rand. You know, if that's in cash, that might be attractive. If that's in script and an overvalued script, not so attractive.
But in a South African environment where nothing is growing except private education, you want as many options as possible, surely.
I would agree. Absolutely.
From an investment perspective, anyway.
The more options, Vieira's optionality of the universe is that one might be rising while another's falling. You can switch out of one and move to another one, so you get relative valuations. It's worth noting also in this space that global private education groups tend to trade on about 30-35 times multiples.
So Advtech on that basis still remains cheap for them.
Hence it's sitting in the fund. Curro obviously is much earlier in their growth phase. But you can play out that in the DCF models where they've got all their targets and the like. And absence of a very, very large deal, they're priced for perfection. But then again, this may be a very, very large deal. It's about half of Curro's market cap.
Which is about the size of Advtech. Okay, so we've gone full circle to the possibility that there are two companies with two cautionaries out at roughly the same period of time.
In the same space.
In the same space, with a universe of opportunity open to them in a massively fragmented South African education business. I can't see it. I don't get it.
I do think the odds are more likely, these are unrelated, the odds are Advtech is more than likely a private equity, because view it this way, you've got a high free float, you've got institutional shareholders, not long-term anchor shareholders, institutional. They price sensitive. If you come in at the right price, they will sell.
Okay, so we're saying this deal won't happen.
I don't think so. I think it's an interesting talking point.
You know what's happening tomorrow? At 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, there's an announcement on Sen saying that this deal has just happened, and this clip goes onto YouTube, and our careers are over. You know that, don't you?
Well, we in the market have to work with incomplete data sets
and have to make opinions. This is the caveat. There we go. Keith McLachlan, fund manager at Alpha Wealth. What a fabulous discussion, all about education. But yeah, education is a really interesting space. It's the fastest growing segment of South Africa's economy. It really is. Parents are desperate. Anybody who can afford it is desperate to get their kids into some form of private schooling. Desperately concerned about the future of public education in South Africa. Yeah, are two small gorillas, but desperate for growth and opportunity. We can't see that deal happening. There'll be more tales tomorrow. Till then, thank you for watching and good night.